Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to find out about this guidance from the Dyslexia and SPLD Trust. You may know that the Dyslexia SPLD Trust is one of the DFE strategic reform partners, which means that it has a specific role in supporting schools to prepare for the new SEND reforms. So this specific audience for this guidance is schools and local authorities. I'm going to talk you through it for about 40 minutes, and then I'm going to demonstrate some of the key contents, how you might use it, and some of the aspects of the guidance. I'm going to stop there, and you can ask some questions, and if you want any further clarification about something, there'll be a chance to do so. It would also be helpful for me if you could be thinking about how you might use this in school, and if you think it would be useful. Okay, so first of all, what is it? It's an interactive PDF which you can download and save, and then use it on your own PC. It's designed to be used flexibly, depending on where the school is really on its road to consistently high universal teaching, and appropriately and well taught targeted interventions with specialist teaching targeted at the right pupils. If you're a teacher in school, then you and the senior leadership team of your school must make that decision, and you can't emphasize enough the importance of working in partnership with the rest of the senior leadership team. This guidance is not about additional and different. It's about getting more of it right in the classroom for more children. And we have the evidence to tell us what works well. So we'll be looking at that in the guidance. How it might be used, it could be used, first of all, its principal use is to help the schools identify what else it needs to do to ensure that it's prepared for the reforms in September, and it can make a short, medium and long-term action plan from it. Another use is to help schools to identify their own areas of strength and where they're going to need additional training. And then there are other aspects. Because this is long-term, it could be used to inform learning walks in schools, to be a focus for a reflective practitioner group. It could be part of a lesson study approach. Aspects of this could be used. For example, does a particular strategy, for example, pausing after asking a question, enable a wider range of pupils to engage? It could be part of the school's induction for its NQTs or staff who are new to the school. So it's very flexible and, as I say, can be used in a range of ways. So I'm now going to model where the guidance is on the website. I'm going to quickly change screens. This is the Dyslexia Trust website, and this is where you will find it. You can go through the NASEN SEND Gateway, which was launched yesterday, and you'll find it that way, and that will take you directly to the Dyslexia SPLD Trust website, and that's what you'll see. Down on the right-hand side, you can see about 21 or 22 resources which you should download and save. I've printed mine off, kept them in a file, so you always know what they look like. Some of them are mostly examples, extracts, key extracts from already published materials, so you can see very quickly there's a lot from the Rose Review, there's some from NASEN, from their guidelines, some from Dyslexia Trust, some from the BDA, all really useful resources to have on hand when you're trying to give examples of good practice. So I'm very quickly going to just show you one or two of these. If I click on All Activities, in the guidance there are a range of activities throughout to help schools build their capacity. So if I click on that, you'll see what that just going to take that off. No, I do not want to leave the web. And you'll see that it's got 4 headings. It's got the section, so that's where you'll find that activity, what the activity's name is, what the purpose of it, and what resources are there to support you. So just very quickly, as I scroll down, you'll see there's a learning walk. The purpose is what you're looking for, evidence that in this school there's high expectations for pupils with literacy difficulties, specific learning difficulties and dyslexia. So what should we be seeing? And we're going to agree what the good practice is that we're looking for in advance. So there are 2 resources there that you would perhaps use to help you. You may already have other resources of your own that you use and you know work well, but these are key resources and they have summarized strategies that many specialists and experts in the field have said work really well in schools. Another activity is evaluating impact. So we want to know if what we are doing is having an impact, and we would use an extract from the IDP to look at that. Another activity is about monitoring and assessment. So this provides staff with an opportunity to understand the richness in the phonics screening check, responding to results, which is a resource on the Dyslexia Trust's website. So that helps schools to consider the preciseness of the support that they're giving to children who are struggling with literacy difficulties, and just checking that it's actually having an impact, and it provides pointers and support for the next steps. Other activities, key messages in the Inclusion Development Programme. This is something that you could do at a SEN network meeting or with a group of staff. Becoming familiar with the Interventions for Literacy Toolkit. It's a really rich resource again. A little training session to help you sort of, if you're not already familiar with it, to help you tell others how to use this particular toolkit. Other activities on how we deploy our resource. Are we getting value for money from our notional SEN budget? How to personalise the professional development needs for your school. Not every member of staff will need the same type of professional development. So it's about asking staff and finding out from staff how confident they are with a range of approaches, and you would agree a plan. Reviewing the assessment practices, looking at what we need to put into the school offer, and the last one is it comprehensive enough? So there's an opportunity there to check your offer with what the Dyslexia SPLD Trust has provided as an exemplar offer. So we're just going to come out of that. Another one, this one tells you about the case studies. So again, sprinkled throughout the guidance are a range of case studies to demonstrate good practice and what schools are already doing. So there's about 13 or 14 case studies there. It explains the purpose of the case studies and where you'll find them and the links to them. So that's a useful resource. Another resource I'd like to take you through is one of my favorites, which is, this has been taken from the Rose report, but put together in a slightly different way to make it very user-friendly. So sections under that incorporate where children have reading comprehension difficulties, a little bit about that, and then there's a little table and it says, okay, so what adjustments can we make to the classroom environment for reading comprehension difficulties, and what can teachers do? What teaching strategies can we use? This moves on to difficulties with spelling and writing. Again, what adjustments to the classroom environment can we make, and what teaching strategies can we use? This continues. Addressing difficulties with verbal memory and verbal processing speeds, explains what verbal memory and verbal processing speed is, and then looking at very simple adjustments that you can make to the environment. Most teachers can do this without a great deal of time, and also very quickly what teaching strategies can we use. These, as we know, are good practice examples and exemplars for all children. So that's about language. Children who are struggling with language. What can we do? How can we help these children in the classroom? Absolutely rich resource, one of my favorite resources in the whole guidance. You'll recognize all of these approaches. The importance of metacognition, explaining what it is, what can we do as a whole school. Hearing and sight, children with arithmetic problems. So as you can see, a very rich resource and not a very difficult one for teachers to access. As I say, most of those resources have come from originally published materials. This last one is it's a new one which has been put together really based on the Code of Practice, and it cross-references the information from the areas that schools have to produce around their SEND information, and it cross-references it with what the local authority has to produce with regards to its local offer, and much of it is very, very similar. So that just helps you to frame what it is that you need to be doing. So those are the resources that have been added, but again, within the guidance, there are links to external websites, so we'll look at those in a minute. So let's back to the guidance now to see what it's producing. Aaron, I'm just aware that I'm just going to move. Okay.
I pressed the wrong button.
Just move the grey screen that I can see because
that's fine. Have you moved it? You all right there? If
okay. I've moved it.
Yeah. If you press the orange little arrow, it will hide it for you. Then it should be easy. Is that all right? Because actually we can't actually see it, so don't worry.
Okay, right. That's fine. I can see what I'm doing now. Okay, so just going to go into the just going to go into the guidance. As I say, it's a PDF, so you can scroll through it in this way. On screen 2, it tells you to download and save the PDF, and this may take a few minutes, so give it time when you download it. Be aware that there's a lot of resource in it. You'll see the extent of it in a minute, so do give it time. Page 3 gives you the content, so you can see this. It's more than 128 slides. You can dip in and out of it and use it. Use the parts that you think are going to be most useful to you at the time. This slide gives you an example of all the aspects of the guidance. So it tells you about the navigation. You can scroll through it, as I've just done, using the side scroll bar as if you were reading a presentation. However, you could go, if you wanted to go through to different bits, you could go to the view. You could go to show and hide the navigation panes, page thumbnails, and you can see very quickly down the side you've got that opportunity to go through the guidance in that way. If you want to see the full resource at once, you can go to the thumbnails and direct your training in that way. Go back to the full screen. Back to the full screen. Okay. There are icons throughout the screens. This icon shows that there's a case study you can link on to demonstrate some effective practice. This means when you see the pencil icon that you've got an activity which you can do if you choose to, and if you click on it, it will take you straight to the activity. We'll look at that in a minute. We'll look at the back button in a minute. This icon means that there's an interactive link which you can go to. So those resources that we've just downloaded, you can also go to them in an interactive way whilst you're scrolling through the presentation. And then this means that there's a video that you can look at, again, if you wish. Okay, I'm apologizing if I scroll too quickly. I'm trying to scroll slowly so that it doesn't hurt anyone's eyes. On page 7, we talk about the goals, or sorry, screen 7, the 3 goals of the guidance. So I'll just reiterate them. The one, to share information about the reforms. The second one is to provide examples of how schools and local authorities can work to implement them. And the third is to increase teachers' confidence in meeting the needs of children with SPLD, including dyslexia, by giving them clear messages about what the research is telling us works well. This is actually, could be used as a poster. It's the big picture. We know that children like knowing the big picture. Well, this is for staff. So this is showing within the education reforms for special educational needs, we know there are massive changes, and this is the big picture. But for this guidance, we are actually looking at the education path, and we're looking at these 4 areas in partnership with the voluntary and independent sector. And if we get it right, these children starting out on their journey with their parents through their education will come out with improved outcomes. That is what this is all about. And we want to see this poster on every staff room wall. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. Okay, if we go into the introduction for practitioners, there are 2 introductions. There's one for practitioners and there's one for governors. Slides 12 to 27 take you through the introduction for practitioners. This would be a really useful thing to use if you only had about 15 minutes to demonstrate what was in the guidance. You were doing it maybe at a staff meeting, to a group of teachers or to your senior leadership team, and you, as I say, you only had a short time to explain it. This really gives you a summary of the contents. We scroll to page 14. This extract is from the Code of Practice, and I think it's really key. And it's saying, you know, why schools need to be using something like this. Schools need to regularly and carefully review the quality of teaching for all pupils, including those at risk of underachievement. This includes reviewing teachers' understanding of strategies to identify and support vulnerable pupils and their knowledge of the SEN most frequently encountered. So this is for all teachers. The evidence that we are using to kind of drive our direction of travel are the key messages from Ofsted, what they said children are doing when they're learning successfully, the research from the Sutton Trust and the Education Endowment Foundation, what their research tells us about value for money, Professor Greg Brooks's research on interventions for literacy, and Sir Jim Rose's report. So the slides 18 to 21 go through each of the 4 areas which are tackled in this guidance, and again summarizes what you're going to find in them. You can see down the side here there are 4 red tabs, or 4 colored tabs rather. You can go between each of these tabs to get you to where you want to go more quickly. And I'm just going to take us back to where we were, which I think was around page 22. Yeah. So we've gone through a summary of the 4 areas. The next couple of pages look at some questions that you might have. You might say, okay, so I want to find out about the simple view of reading. Why do I need to know about it? You can click on here. This is where you'll find that information in this resource. You might have a question of, we think some of our pupils are not accessing the curriculum because of the limited range of teaching strategies they're experiencing. How can we address this quickly? Again, click on some of the resource documents and you can find some quick answers there. So these are the questions that these next couple of pages just take you through some questions to help you find your way around the resource. That might be a little activity you want to do for yourself. We get to slide 28. This is your introduction for governors, and slides 32 to 37 take you through 12 questions that will help governors provide effective challenge and support to the schools around the progress of pupils that we're talking about. So these are 12 key questions. There's what they might expect to see where it's working well, and then examples from this guidance which can help schools. So it's helping governors to know what good practice is looking like and what they can expect from their schools. So if we go in now to the very first section, which is effective practice, we see that this section is in 2 parts. This section, the first part is the evidence, so it takes you through all the evidence, key messages from the research, and the second part is about resources to support you, provide that effective practice. Okay. So this quote has been taken from a report from Dyslexia Action, Dyslexia and Literacy Difficulties Policy and Practice Review. So we know what works for children and young people with dyslexia and literacy difficulties, and while there are no quick fixes, research and best practice converge. So that's a really key start, I think, to this section. So I'm now going to demonstrate for you how we can move between the screen page to an activity, link to a relevant resource from that activity, and then back to this page. So on this page, you can see there's a pencil which tells you there's an activity. So if we click, this will take us to our first activity, which is agreeing the focus for the learning walk. You're going to look for evidence that in this school, staff have high expectations for pupils with literacy difficulties. So what should we be seeing? You may have done some work around these key strategies before, and this is now what you've agreed you will be seeing in your classrooms. So we click to the resource that I showed you earlier, and that's come back to our activity page, and then that will take us, the back button will take us back to the page that we were on. So this next slide, I want to take you to an external slide. I'm just going to check if it should have been the previous one. Yes. I want to take you now to an external website, show you what that is offering as part of this guidance, and then back to the page. So this is taking you to the Education Endowment Foundation Toolkit, which was a piece of research carried out to look at interventions and approaches that provide value for money for schools. And you can see this, they've laid it out. If you're not familiar with this, you may already be, but if you're not, you can see that it goes through a range of interventions and things that schools do, whether it's cost effective, and the value added that it gives. And one that I particularly wanted to draw your attention to is the metacognition and self-regulation. You know, not a lot of money and a lot of value added. You can click on that, tells you a little bit more about metacognition, what they found out, how they carried out their research, and back to our screen pages again. Okay. These next few slides, 44 to 51, tell us about Professor Greg Brooks's research, what works well and what schools can do. And if we, it's really just been unpacked to summarize for you the key messages. And there's a couple of slides which tell you what he found works well and what schools can do to exemplify and accelerate that kind of practice in schools. Slides 52 to 57 tell us about Sir Jim Rose's review and his report, and again summarises some of the key messages from there. I'm going to take you now, if you look on this page, it talks about the simple view of reading. And again, this isn't just something for Key Stage 1 teachers to know about. This is something that Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 teachers need to understand and keep that framework in their head when they're observing how children are responding to their teaching. So it's about the simple view of reading. I'm going to take you now to the second activity, which asks you to look at the IDP. Some of you may be familiar with the Inclusion Development Programme, and this is the Inclusion Development Programme which is specifically linked to dyslexia. So this is taking us outside into another online learning program. We're going to Module 1, Screen 2 of the Inclusion Development Programme, Teaching and Supporting Pupils with Dyslexia. I'm going to Module 1. I'm going to Screen 2. So this tells us about 4 case studies to help us understand what the simple view of reading is all about. We have the quadrant, which you're aware of, where we have language comprehension processes and word recognition processes. And children may be in one of each of these quadrants. We can look at Paul, who's got good language comprehension but is struggling to develop the processes that underlie word recognition. Nicola, she reads fluently and accurately with good comprehension. Jaswinder has only been in the UK for 2 years but has picked up sufficient English to enable her to make friends and contribute orally. So she continues to develop her language comprehension and is progressing well in developing her word recognition. Simon has marked difficulties with both word recognition and language comprehension. So that helps you to understand the profiles of children who may sit within each of these quadrants. And the activity here is to download the blank simple view of reading and think about children in your school who may fit within one or other of these quadrants. So that was to show you how you can move between programs which are online. So slide 53 to 57 tells us about the key messages within the Rose Review. It tells us about what was successful for most children with dyslexia, where it was successful when teachers used particular approaches, and what this would look like in schools. Everything, by the way, that's underlined means that there's a link to it, so you can link to it and come back to the resource. Slide 58 draws attention to the research that highlights the importance of the early identification of children who have language difficulties and the impact that this can have on their literacy skills. And we'll come back to this further on in the resource. But again, that is one of the key messages within this resource. So this second part of effective practice takes you through all of the resources that are available online freely to support the development of effective practice in schools. This next slide tells you the key groups that have contributed, that are part of and have linked to this, this guidance. If you click on each of these, it will take you to the websites. But these are the areas, these are the partners who've worked with us on the guidance, and you'll see as you scroll through the next pages the absolute wealth of resources that are on there to help you develop practice in school. Okay, so the next slides 87 to 103, take us through the school funding reforms. Slide 89, explain about the reforms. And if we take a look at activity 6, really, this is a kind of a health check. And perhaps this one could be used as part of a reflective practitioner activity. It's explaining about core funding, and it's often called the age-weighted pupil unit. This is part of the money that all children, this is the money that all children receive, and then the notional SEN budget is a percentage identified within the overall budget, which can be used flexibly by schools, but it's called notional because schools may use it in a way that they feel best suits their group of students. It also explains that what colleges, academies, sixth forms and FE colleges, what funding they can access or through the funding reforms and how they access that. This activity has a range of questions for schools to consider. If I click on the link, you'll see the range of questions. So what are we doing? Is it good enough? How are we evaluating the effectiveness? How do we consider how we make the best provision? It's really just getting underneath what decisions do we make when we are using our resources. And it's linking all the time, linking funding to impact and outcomes. We use the back button to go back. Page or slides 90 to 95 explain these funding systems, although the detail of this is going to be different in each local authority, depending on their profile and context. This is a link to a YouTube clip. Philippa Staubs from the Council for Disabled Children has got a video which she uses to present to parents to explain the funding reforms. So you could link this, as I'm doing now. I'm just going to take you through it, just so you see. So that's another resource you might want to use to familiarise yourself or parents around the funding reforms. So this one, again, some questions for schools to consider as part of their graduated approach and to audit the quality of their provision. So it's about value for money. What are we doing for all pupils? What are we doing for those who have got additional and different needs? And there may be a few pupils who need a very individualized approach, and how are we using our funding to secure those individual approaches? This slide is saying that the SENCO head teacher and governing body should establish a clear picture of the resources that are available to the school. And it's not just about considering the strategic approach to the SEN resources, but also any other resources that are targeted at particular groups, such as the pupil premium. We know that pupils with special educational needs are not a separate group. Some of those children will be vulnerable in many different ways. They may be looked after children, they may be children who are able to access pupil premium, there may be children who are very bright in many ways. So we need to look at the range of resources that are coming into schools to make sure that the best use of funding is guaranteed to enable improved outcomes. So that's what this page is telling us too. Slides 100 to 103 tell us a little bit more about some additional sources of money that schools can access. Slides 104 to 117 take us through the graduated approach. I'll just take you to a few of these slides. Again, we go back to the importance of early identification, although we recognize that some difficulties only become evident as children and young people grow older. But we're making that link further on in their guidance about early language acquisition and the later link with literacy development. So slides 107 and 108 look at the assess, plan, do and review model. A case study example of what a school is doing. Slides 109 and 110 draws our attention again to those specifics to be aware of in early years around language development and its impact on literacy development. And if you look down the right-hand side, you'll see an absolute plethora of fantastic resources that really will help schools to consider, have they left any stone unturned in their search for getting the right intervention in as early as possible. We've got early support resources, the School Year's Developmental Journal, useful one, the Communication Trust resources, Communicating Phonics, a guide to support teachers delivering and interpreting the phonics screening check, the I Can Talk series, the Inclusion Development Programme. Between slides 112 and 116, we revisit the 4 key elements of good practice seen through that and filtered through that lens of the graduated approach. And again, for each of those elements about universal high-quality teaching, there are examples on case studies and resources to support you work out what you can do as a school to enhance your universal teaching. There's a case study here from the SEND Pathfinder work, which looks at what one school did to develop its speech and language provision in school. just go back to page 113 again. So again, it summarizes what each of these areas are as part of the graduated approach. And by now, really, by the time you've taken teachers through this resource, they should have a clear idea of what good universal teaching looks like. And SENCOs, they will understand the need to check the evidence base behind interventions that they're choosing, that they're selecting, and also the importance of quality assuring the delivery of these interventions. There's also, by now, recognizing the need to ensure that they need to make the link between provision and measuring impact, and if it's not working, to do something further. And that might involve quality assuring the delivery of the intervention, checking if the pupil's attendance, is it the right intervention, has there been an appropriate identification of needs through assessments, and if the pupil isn't responding to a well-founded and well-delivered intervention, what else you need to do. This last section, the local offer, excuse me, it's likely that most of the children and young people that we're discussing here will not be the group that receive an education, health and care plan unless, of course, they've got other complex difficulties. Excuse me. So we need to see the local offer and what the school offers as part of the same landscape. Schools must, and it says this very clearly in the Code of Practice, make clear to parents a range of information about their arrangements for meeting the needs of those with special educational needs. So the school SEND information is therefore part of the local offer. So this page is a bit of a summary page. So you'll now have information about what works well, what resources you can use, how you can deploy your funding, what a graduated response to meeting needs looks like. Through the activities, you also have information about approaches and resources that you're using in schools. So you'll be gathering very, very rich data in your school. Through your learning walks, you'll know which teachers and which TAs require additional training and which staff have got good practice in place. And you will have an action plan in place for this additional training. You'll have information about gaps in your provision, and you'll be considering creative ways to address this using the case studies and resources supplied in this guidance. So this next stage then is what needs to go in to this local offer from your school and from your area-wide offer. So this is, we can click here to activity 10, and it's asking you to think about how you could write your section in your SEND information for your offer. Just bringing you back to that document that I showed you at the beginning. Down the right-hand side, schools must publish this information, and they might choose to do it in different ways. They might do it under the 4 broad headings identified in the Code of Practice: communication and interaction, cognition and learning, sensory, social, emotional and mental health difficulties, and sensory or physical needs. So if they choose to do that, then they certainly have enough information to populate what they do for children with literacy difficulties. If we go back, another way schools might want to present their information is through a range of questions that parents might ask or might want to know the answer to. These questions have come from a range of work done by the Southeast 7 Pathfinders, and schools, if they were to populate each of these answers, then they would be fulfilling their duties under the Code of Practice. So that's an interesting way. And if you remember, your audience for your offer and for your SEND information is parents and young people, then I think it would make sense to write it in a way that's attractive and makes sense to them. So we have a summary page here, and these next few pages then take you once again to lots of examples of what people are doing under Universal. So an example of a case study of what a school is doing under its universal provision, an example of what a case study of what one school is doing with its targeted provision, and what one school is doing around its specialist provision, further case studies there, and some video material to look at. So this is what a parent could expect from a school and a local authority. And if a child who has not got an education, health and care plan, they can still expect support from different services, and they need to know how it may be accessed. So these are just some of the services that it might include. And the rest of this guidance then takes you through the activities. So that brings me to the end of the walk through the